Hello everyone, welcome back to the Zach F1 channel, and in today's episode we have the final, technically, because I'm still going to make a post FP2 video and all of that jazz for my live streams, best team for F1 fantasy video of the season. Now, straight away I'm going to talk a little bit about Qatar. I'm not very happy about it. I mean, my global rankings did go up tremendously, but I was really hoping that I could crack the top 1,000 this season, and I do think I would have without all of the shenanigans going on. But hey ho, we live and we learn, we take what we can get, and at the end of the day, at least Joe got driver of the day. What a lad. But thank you all so much for watching these videos throughout the full season. Just a little message before the video starts. Thank you all so much for the support throughout this whole season for the channel. For a lot of you that have come since my channel's got over 1,000 subs, I actually started this season with 374 subscribers, and now the channel has over 1,800. I actually just couldn't physically imagine such a massive transformation over one season, considering I'd been doing YouTube for 3 to 4 years now. I can't believe it's been that long, but I've basically been doing it since I was 18. So it's a crazy thought. But anyway, thank you all so much for sticking with me during this ride. And hey, let's make even more great videos. Thank you all so much. And then, of course, we still have the F1 Fantasy surveys. Remember, get your voices heard for anything you want changed in the F1 Fantasy game, or to just say how your experience with F1 Fantasy is, because we're really trying to improve the game and we need as many people to fill out this form as possible to make change possible. But anyway, like and subscribe, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord. Let's get straight into it. So let's start off with the chips, and straight away, it's plain and simple this weekend. If you have a chip, you use it, because it's the final race weekend of the season. You just got to use what you have. Now, of course, you have the power list, which for me goes extra DRS, limitless, very closely followed behind, no negative, autopilot, final fix, and wildcard. So if you have more than one chip left, use the one that is better. You're just going to have to chuck away the other chip. And it's pretty much as simple as that for the chips this weekend. Realistically, you shouldn't have any left by this point, but I know some people will, so there you go. That is for the people who still have a chip or two left. And then constructors, we are back to the plain old Ferrari McLaren builds. I think Mercedes have had their time in the sun, and in Qatar, it wasn't the best weekend for them points-wise, and Ferrari and McLaren are just the safe options. There's not much of a value difference between Ferrari and Mercedes, and Ferrari are just a much better option, especially with how well they look suited for Abu Dhabi. And then McLaren, realistically, you only want to drop them down to a Mercedes build with Mercedes and Ferrari if you physically cannot afford to have the likes of Norris Leclerc teams or Piastri-Sainz teams, or just a 2 premium driver build altogether. And then with the rest of the constructors, Red Bull have this little issue called Perez, so don't go anywhere near them. And then the rest of them just don't get you enough points. I mean, just take a look at Aston Martin, Haas. I mean, even a team like Sauber, who had a great weekend last outing, it's still just so many less points than a big constructor gives you. Now, premium driver wise, going into a weekend like this, it's pretty much, again, the top two are Norris and Leclerc. It does look like Ferrari are going to be fast, and it looks like McLaren are just going to be behind them. We've seen Norris is very good in qualifying. We've seen Leclerc can do it in qualifying as well, and especially with Leclerc, his race pace, because he always tends to do better over a full race. So having both of them looks like the safe and best bet so far this weekend. Knowing practice, it could potentially change, but that's why we make a post-practice video and we talk about that there. But of course, if you can't afford these sorts of lineups, Sainz and Piastri are good backups. And then you have the differential choice of George Russell, if you really do believe in him, which I actually do believe in him as well. But he tends to qualify well and then drop a bit down in the race, which is not as good for F1 Fantasy, but you still know that he's going to get you some good points, even just staying in the top 4. Now, what I do know for certain is the drivers that you should not go near, and of course, it's the same old names you hear every single weekend now. It's Sergio Perez, too expensive, doesn't give you enough points. Max Verstappen, just is too expensive. He does give you enough points, but he's crazy expensive, considering if you have enough money to have Verstappen and Norris, let's say, well, you should just do a free premium driver build. And then, of course, you have Fernando Alonso. he just shouldn't be a premium driver. End of. Aston Martin isn't there. And then Lewis Hamilton as well. Lewis Hamilton is around the same price as Leclerc and Piastri. He's miles clear of Russell and Sainz value as well, which means he's just too expensive for the points he gives you. And then the top 3 cheap drivers going into the drivers basically below 15 million still has to be Nico Hülkenberg. He didn't have the best race in Qatar, but a lot of it was out of his control. He still is one of the most consistent midfield drivers that gets you a lot of points in F1 Fantasy and actually does well in the races, so it sort of combines. And then you have Yuki Tsunoda, again, a terrible race for him, but still manages to get a lot of points in F1 Fantasy. And Kevin Magnussen, high risk, high reward. This is why he's 3rd place. Risk it for a chocolate biscuit, potentially. He's very expensive, that's why he's only 3rd for me. But we've seen on weekends, where he does thrive, he gets a lot of points. But he's also very high risk for getting DNF points and just not doing anything in some races. So be careful with that. I do have to say, be careful of the Alpine drivers. Of course, Ocon's not there. We'll see what Doohan costs, but he'll probably just be put over Ocon's value, which definitely isn't worth it for a rookie coming into that Alpine seat that might not even be realistically an Alpine that's worth even looking into if they don't give him the new specs. And then Gasly, again, he's been pretty consistent, but there's just too many issues with Alpine DNFing or just qualifying too well and then dropping back. For me, it's too high risk and too low reward when there's better drivers elsewhere. All of these drivers I just mentioned are pretty expensive. Now, they do get you the most points for cheap drivers, but they're not the best value. Now, if you want the top 3 best value for points, cheap drivers, then you have the likes of Franco Colapinto, very much a dud driver, but he costs so little. He's in the 7 millions that you just have to have him in your team to make sure that you can make room for bigger premium drivers and better constructors, which do score the bulk of your points. Valtteri Bottas as well. However, Bottas is actually doing pretty decent in F1 Fantasy recently. Then you have Zhou. He's starting to become a bit more expensive, but there's still quite a big gap from Zhou to the likes of Gasly, Lawson, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg. So I'd still say he's value for money. And then you could also say Albon's value for money, but for me, he's just still too risky. But you should look at him because now he's $1 million less than Zhou. It is one of those things where potentially if you have Zhou, you could drop down to Albon and then potentially increase Piastri up to Norris, let's say, which I think would be worth it, but you just got to know going into it that Albon's a very risky asset. But those are the cheap drivers, and those are all of the tips and tricks I can give you going into the weekend. And then briefly, before I talk about the team selections, I need to talk about driver of the day, because if we have what I'm predicting, Abu Dhabi, because it normally is, a pretty boring race with, let's say, Norris or Verstappen winning. Let's say one of the Ferraris doesn't win, because I think if Ferrari win, they've got enough people wanting to give them driver of the day they could. But let's say we get Norris or Verstappen winning a race. There's a high chance that driver of the day just goes to one of the retiring veterans from the sports. Now, I did just say veterans. You have Zhou retiring. I don't think he's going to get driver of the day. That's why I said veterans. But you've got K-Mag and Bottas both going at the end of the season without any seats. And I do think, because driver of the day obviously is fan voted, we could see one of them getting potentially an extra 10 points because people want to give them something to leave the sport with. And I'm pushing towards more Valtteri Bottas. Now, having both of them in your team would be great because you're covering both ends. But just something in me is telling me that Valtteri Bottas is getting driver of the day. He's such a massive name in the sport and he's potentially leaving. He doesn't have a seat for 2025. I just think it's one of those moments where everyone's just going to come together and vote Valtteri Bottas. We'll see exactly if it does happen because, you know, if someone unexpected wins, they'll get it. If a Ferrari wins, I think they'll get it. But let's say Norris or Verstappen wins, like I mentioned, I could easily see Bottas winning driver of the day. So keep that in mind when you make your teams. But on top of that, let's talk about the team selections. As this weekend, I'm going to try something different. Please comment down below which method you like me doing because I've tried a few different methods. I'm going to make a video after this season asking which sort of ones you liked more. But I'm going to try a different method for showing team selections where I don't actually show teams. I'm just going to show exactly how you could build every single team per se. So let's get straight into it. And the first thing is most teams, and realistically all building blocks of the team, start with having Bottas and Colapinto in your team. They're such dud drivers that clear up so much space in your team and they've got such a high jump up from the likes of Bottas and Colapinto to Albon, Gasly, Tsunoda, because I don't even think Albon's worth touching, that I think it's just put those two in your team, figure out everything elsewhere. Now, the cheap drivers, you still have the Zhou to Hulkenberg ladder, which of course starts with Zhou, goes to Lawson, goes to Tsunoda, then goes to Hulkenberg. But this weekend, I actually want to call it the Albon to K-Mag ladder. Because yes, I do say to not go near Albon, but if you really need that 1 million extra and you've got no other revenues to get that, then you go Albon. If you then can afford to go up to Zhou, you go to Zhou. Then you go up to Lawson, then Tsunoda, then Hulkenberg, and then K-Mag, because potentially he could be getting you driver of the day. And then premium driver-wise, it's Russell to Norris. Now, you start off, can you afford Russell? Okay, if that's all I can bring in, I bring in Russell. Can I afford Sainz? I can increase Russell to Sainz because Ferrari looked better this weekend. Then Sainz up to Piastri. McLaren look more balanced, potentially. Piastri up to Leclerc, that is ideal. And then if you still have more money, Leclerc to Norris. And then you do the exact same thing for your second premium driver and your third premium driver. You do all of these depending on how many premium drivers you can bring into your team. But that's just as simple as the team selections get. You just follow those ladders and see which team it gives you. With the constructors, again, Ferrari and McLaren with all of these teams, unless you can't afford the best premium drivers, and then potentially you could drop McLaren to Mercedes, as Ferrari look like the ones you don't want to drop this weekend. But anyway, that about sums up this video. I just can't believe it's the final best team for F1 Fantasy video that I'll be making this season. I'm going to mention this in my other video as well. Zach F1 is not going on break. I will still have 1 to 2 videos of my historic ones, like my 2010 championship decider video. I really like making those ones, and there's just so many F1 stories that I want to get out, show all of you people, because they're great fun to edit, they're great fun to record, and gives me something to do over the winter break when there's no F1, and it can keep me excited for the 2025 season, and all of you as well. Thank you all so much for the support on the channel. I go into this more on my everything you need to know, but it's just been a roller coaster of a season for F1 and for my channel, so thank you all so much for this. You'll be doing me a massive favor if you do the F1 Fantasy survey, because we need as many people to respond with what they want in the game to make it proper credible. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching me this season. I will have a post FP2 and my live stream as per usual this weekend, but this is the final big block F1 Fantasy video. And thank you everyone who's been with me for the whole season. And thank you everyone who's just tuned in. But anyway, I'll see you all later. Take care and have a good day.